Hello everybody, thanks for joining me today. I'm Jackie and I create mosaics using sea glass. And today I'm going to talk to you about 5 frequently asked questions I get about my sea glass mosaic art. So what I find about mosaic art is that there are quite a few people that do mosaic art, but not a lot of people that use sea glass as a medium. And then when you look at sea glass art, there are quite a few people that do sea glass art, but not necessarily a lot of people that do mosaics with their sea glass. So when people see my art, I tend to field a lot of questions. So I thought today I would address a few of those questions for you. So one of the questions I get is, what is sea glass? And you would be surprised, if you're watching this video, you probably know what sea glass is and you're a bit of a sea glass fan, but it kind of surprises me how often I get that question. And I tend to feel kind of bad for people that don't know what sea glass is because it's such a big part of my life and I love it. And I think, oh, I feel so bad for you. You don't even know what sea glass is. But anyway, I thought it is a question worth addressing because I do have 3 criteria for sea glass. In order for glass to be classified as sea glass in my mind, there are 3 criteria that it has to meet. Number 1, it has to come from the beach. That's an easy one. Although there are a lot of people that call glass that's been done in a tumbler or that has been manufactured in some way, they tend to think of it as sea glass. In my mind, it's not sea glass unless it comes from the sea or from the lake or the water or whatnot. But I do get all of my material that I use does come from the beach. The second criteria that glass has to meet, in my mind, in order to be classified as sea glass, is it has to be frosty. So I do collect quite a bit of stuff at the beach that gets tossed back because it's not done yet. So for me, that really doesn't meet the criteria because I like my sea glass to be fairly well tumbled. Some of my sea glass has spent many, many years in the water and is full of little pits and it's very, very frosty, and some of it is fairly fresh. Maybe it's only been in the water for 15 or 20 years and it's not quite as tumbled. But if I pick up a piece of glass that isn't tumbled enough, I do tend to toss it back. And then when I'm working on my mosaics, if I come across a piece of glass that I decide maybe it was okay when I picked it up, but I'm not going to use it, I'll put it in a bag and it will get tossed back as well. So here's an example of some sea glass that I've set aside to be thrown back because I feel like it's not quite finished enough, so it's not really meeting my criteria for sea glass. Versus this pile, which is all nice and frosty and well finished. This to me is an example of real sea glass. And the third and most important criteria for me is that it has to have the ability to transport me back to the beach. So for me, that's the real power in sea glass, is that it can make you feel like you're right back at the beach. When you look at it, when you play with it, when you do stuff with it, when you have art created with sea glass, I can look at that art and I feel like I'm immediately transported back to the beach. So for me, the question, what is sea glass, is a bit more complicated once I stop to think about it. So a second question I get is, where did you get all your sea glass? And although I'll pick up sea glass wherever I go, the majority of my sea glass comes from Prince Edward Island, which is along the eastern shore of Canada. And the reason why I get most of my sea glass there is that's where I grew up, and when I was a child we had a cottage on the beach, and now as an adult I have a cottage along that same beach. So I spend a lot of time there in the summer, and I have my whole life, so that's where the majority of my sea glass comes from. A third question I get is, how much sea glass do you have? Because they look at my mosaic pieces and they can see that there's a lot of sea glass in each piece. And I do have quite an extensive collection of sea glass because I have been collecting my entire life. If you want to see the whole of my sea glass collection, I did do a video last summer and I posted it on my channel. It's called There's No Such Thing as Too Much Sea Glass. And if you want to see all that sea glass, you can go back and watch that video. And although I've been collecting all my life, it's not just me that collects. Everyone in the family collects sea glass, so all of that, and a lot of that comes to my collection. So I have quite a bit of sea glass. So a fourth question I get about my sea glass mosaic art is how many pieces of sea glass did you use in that piece? And I will always answer I have no idea, because it is quite a few pieces of sea glass to fill in an entire frame, and the larger the frame, the more sea glass it takes. So on a piece this large, this is a big old window frame, I have no idea how many pieces of sea glass I used. But to answer that question, I did make an attempt to count the pieces in this particular sea glass mosaic. And this is a small 8 by 10 frame. And when I counted the sea glass, I got to about 350. I know it's kind of hard to count because I lose track pretty easily. But it's about 350 pieces. So if you think 350 pieces for an 8 by 10, you can extrapolate from there and get some sort of idea how many pieces of sea glass it takes to complete a mosaic. And the fifth question that I often get is how long did it take you to do that mosaic? And again, I usually say hours and hours of relaxation, because it does take a long time. Like I've said before, this is not fast art, it's slow art, and the longer it takes me to do it, the more hours of relaxation I get out of it. But I did make an attempt to keep track on this particular mosaic, how long it took me to do it, and it took me 4 hours. And that's not including the time to prepare the frame or draw the design or gather up all my materials. That's just to glue on the sea glass. So from there you can say, okay, for a large piece like this, if an 8 by 10 took 4 hours, a large piece would have taken quite a few hours to complete. So thanks for joining me today and listening to me address 5 of the most frequently asked questions that I get. I hope my answers have been helpful for you. And if you join me in my next video, I'm going to address another 5 questions. Until next time, happy sea glass hunting.